Morning. This is such a rare treat, not just for us in Cleveland, but for really anybody in the world to see Jacob Collier in person, because most of us know him from these videos that Tommy mentioned on YouTube. I think this is an incredibly unusual and special thing that we're going to see today. So, Jacob, thank you so much for being here and sharing your craft with us.
Yeah, it's cool. Hey, everyone. How's it going? Cool. Yeah, it's so cool to be here, man. It's really, really, really cool. I'm very excited. Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. Good stuff.
So, before we talk about your process, can we have a look at one of the videos that you've done?
All right.
This is going to be Fascinating Rhythm.
Yeah, this is Fascinating Rhythm. Let's see if I can get full screen.
Fascinating rhythm, you got me on the go. Fascinating rhythm, I'm on a quiver. Ba ba ba, all the mess you're making. The neighbors want to know why I'm always shaking, just like a flivver. Each morning I get up with a song to find out night no work has been done. I know that once it didn't matter, but now you do it when you stop. I'm so unhappy. I'm so unhappy. Won't you take day off? Decide to run along somewhere far away. We'll make it snappy. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Fascinating rhythm. Oh, won't you stop taking on me? Please stop digging now. Fascinating rhythm. You got me on the go. Fascinating rhythm. I'm on the quiver. What makes you make it? The neighbors want to know why I'm always shaking, just like a flivver. Each morning I get up with a song. I get some shiny sun to find out. I know what to find out. No work's been done. I know that once it didn't matter, but now you do it when you take it back. So I know you do it wrong. You stop to find out. You know I'm so unhappy. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Fascinating rhythm. I don't stop. Bop do bop 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 do bop do bop do do. It's such a fascinating rhythm. All together now. go, fascinating rhythm. I'm on a quiver. What a mess you're making. The neighbors want to know why I'm always shaking. Just like a flavor. Each morning I hop with the sun, wake up with the sun. And I know work has been done. I know that's lots of that. Tonight every when something bad happens, so when happy it's very clear. Won't you take a way? You can something on the line, so look for a way out. Come make his rhythm bop. Oh, to be
Okay, so before we talk about that video, I guess my first question is, man, who are you? Like, where did this start for you?
All right, that's a good question. So I'm from London. I was born in London to a family of musicians. Sort of everybody plays in the family, so it's kind of never a moment's silence. It's actually kind of nice because it's a sort of chaotic environment where creativity is encouraged as opposed to stymied. So that's cool. I was kind of offered instrumental lessons at quite a young age, and I declined the offer. I sort of thought, I don't want to do that. And actually, that kind of maybe one of the best decisions I've made. I've sort of built my own framework of understanding music and harmony and rhythm and things like this. And when you do it this way, things that you kind of learn and they go straight into your heart instead of coming through kind of intermediary means like, you know, being imposed by somebody else. It's an interesting thing. I mean, you know, obviously you learn so much from everybody that you meet if you allow yourself to. But I think, you know, that's maybe something important to mention. It's just that I've constructed this kind of thing for myself. I really encourage everyone to do that because, I mean, you know, as far as I can see, many of the greatest musicians have this way of working where they have this kind of this world inside their mind where they understand things, and that's kind of like that's an emotional place and it's a musical place. They kind of join together. I think one without the other just doesn't really work. But going back to the question, I was kind of raised on good music. Many of Tommy's records, I can guarantee you, were in my collection as a young boy. And I suppose when you have good food, you just like spew out good food as well, I suppose. So it's important to fill your ears and your mind with interesting stuff and challenging things and stuff that makes you think. And if you think about these kind of things in like an emotional way, then they kind of they unite with the world around you, and suddenly everything's kind of relevant instead of it being something that's in the distance or something that you don't really feel like you can access. And even people that don't, you know, have a really deep theoretical understanding of music can still access this stuff because it has like an emotional anchor. And I was encouraged very much to think about music as something that was emotional, like all the time, you know, whether it's something that's phrased in a kind of way or voiced in a kind of way or just kind of the timbre. You know, if a musician expands one's arsenal of like emotional devices, then that's it, man. You got it. It's kind of that's the secret weapon. And I think with those things under your kind of belt, as it were, then you have the tools to communicate with people across the whole of the world. Not just kind of like freakish musicians or people that are like music nerds and stuff. It's kind of, if you want to be universal, you got to be emotional about it. That's how I was brought up anyway.
What were some of the primary influences in your developing this approach?
Well, Stevie Wonder is he's so good, man. He's really good. And I was brought up with Stevie Wonder's every record he ever made, sort of thing, and the way he phrased, the way he kind of arranged stuff, and he played every instrument, and I was like fully inspired by that. That was really cool. And then, you know, and people like songwriters like Sting, for example, I was really into Sting. Bobby McFerrin, the singer, I was brought up on him in a deep way, and that was obviously really ridiculously cool because he can sing this great big range. And when I was younger, I obviously couldn't sing the low stuff, and I've just kind of, I guess I was kind of lucky because I've got a vocal range that can sing deeply and highly, I suppose. So that was cool. I mean, Bobby was the man as far as that was concerned. But I remember I discovered Take 6, the a cappella group Take 6. man, you know, I freaked out. It was like everything I loved in this environment where it was like spiritual and like, you know, energy. Everyone was just like in this world, and everyone was digging it, and it was just such a kind of energetic way of communicating music, and all the songs were about kind of things they believed in, and I was really struck by that, as much as the harmony, you know, which I was freaking out about. But yeah, I suppose that, yeah, Take 6, I have to sort of say that was big for me, because it was pretty big for me. But then, you know, when I was a bit younger, I was about 12 or 13, I sang classically. That was the only thing I was really trained in, was classical singing. And I sang in a couple of operas by Benjamin Britten, for example, who's a composer from England. Serious stuff, man. It's like the harmony he gets into is kind of beyond anything you've maybe heard. I mean, I'd ever heard before. That was the new benchmark. I mean, he gets into like 12-tone stuff. And the story, the opera I sang in was called The Turn of the Screw. It's like a horror story. And so I got to examine his emotional, the way he communicated this stuff, and how he'd haunt the audience, or he'd kind of tantalize the audience, or he'd like charm the audience, and all this stuff. And I was very young, but I kind of memorized the opera just because I'm a bit of a weird person with memorizing stuff. And it was crazy. And so, yeah, Benjamin Britten sort of collided with Take 6, and then sort of I had this thing, and I found that I always loved to sing, and one dude, a friend of mine, just sort of said, well, look, man, there's YouTube, and you could do that, and so I just put it up for fun, and I still put the stuff up for fun. I mean, I think the day that changes, it's kind of like death for creativity and humanity. But yeah, I just sort of put it up there, and the response has been kind of crazy, man, really overwhelming. You know, and here I am talking to you guys. It's amazing how it just sort of shoots out there. But you know, everything that I do up there just has an anchor in something I really love. There's no point in doing something if you don't really love it. That's what I think anyway, really.
You are, I guess nobody has mentioned, I don't know if Tommy mentioned it, you're now 20 years old.
20, yeah.
So I think we can all agree, pretty young.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess so.
And it seems like as you've been developing, technology has been right there with you. Like you sort of have been coming into your own in a world where YouTube exists and you can make these things on a computer at home.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The world's a different place with regard to creativity. I mean, like my bedroom is here, not here, but it's at home. It's sort of here, and then straight underneath it is my music room. So the same size. I really wanted to get a trap door so I could kind of go down in the middle of the night, but it's so expensive I didn't do it. But the music room it's just filled with instruments, so many instruments. It's kind of like outlandish, unreasonable. But I love collecting instruments and sounds, and so I've really got a thing about it. So it's a space, and I live at home. I'm still at college, but I live at home, and so it's really a treat to be able to kind of go out of bed downstairs, like get a glass of water, and then go into the music room and just kind of work at home. It's a luxury, I can tell you that. But yeah, I mean, even 10 years ago, you couldn't really build yourself a little studio. All I've really got at home is kind of like a couple of microphones. I had one microphone, one SM58 microphone for pretty much, well, almost all my life, 18 years. And then I got 19 years, and then I got a couple of new ones recently. But as far as the setup is concerned, it's kind of simple. I've got, a sound card, I've got, say this SM58, which is what I did. I got a couple of C414s recently, which is kind of like a different game. But SM58, and I've got a sound card, and I've got Logic on a computer. And this is all you really need, and your imagination, which is kind of that's I built up this world, which is kind of my world. It's a bit like the inside of my mind. It's my space, but it's really cool to share it with people. So yeah, it's just kind of worked out that technology is developed, and then I've kind of grown up, and we've reached a place where one can make some stuff, and then you can sort of just press go and see where it leads you. And now I've got kind of thousands of people looking for my new video, which is just really overwhelming and weird, but really lovely as well. It's awesome. But I think if you take technology too seriously, then you sort of go down a massive, great big abyss, like a sort of rabbit hole, just because it's so easy to lose yourself in it. If I started sort of taking my whole career seriously, like I've got, it's weird. I mean, the whole thing, the purpose of the whole thing is to have good fun, and it just happens that the internet's there, and that the power is in like your hands to do some stuff. If you want to do something, you do it, and that's as simple as that. And if you've got if you've got a strong enough vision, then it'll probably find the people you want to find. You just got to sort of keep going with it, really. Just kind of be true to that vision, I guess.
So could we talk about a little bit about the process of how you approach an arrangement? Like, for example, Fascinating Rhythm.
Yeah.
How did you imagine that arrangement? How did that come to you? What were the first thoughts that you had about it?
Okay, yeah. So when I think about a song, which song to arrange, I mean, like there are lots of people on YouTube who arrange songs that are kind of famous, and so therefore they get lots of like social acclaim, and it's like really funny, and it's like really hip and stuff, and people who know the songs watch the videos and dig that. I've never been massively into I've never gone out and searched for like fame, really. I've just sort of done the thing I want to do, and so whenever I choose a song, I just choose a song that I really love. This song, I mean, yeah, all the songs on my YouTube account are songs I really love. This one, I love it, man. I've known this song for many years, and it's a kind of catchy thing. It's kind of repetitive, and so I thought, hey, I could do this, and once you kind of make that decision, what I find anyway is that you can't sort of go like, kind of running after the thing. I can't set out and say, I really want to get loads of hip shit, then it's like, that would be great. You can't run after that. You have to just kind of let the stuff come to you when it wants to come to you. So what I found was there was one day, I think I was like procrastinating. I was supposed to be doing something, and I suddenly had a lot of ideas for this, which often happens. But I was eating my lunch, and I thought, oh man, that would be cool. Something came into my mind, like, oh, I could do this. What about that? And suddenly I was kind of on fire with it, and I went into my garden, and I walked around in sort of circles, and I got up my iPhone device, and I got my voice memos application up on it, and I sort of walked around in these circles, and I recorded all the ideas I thought of. So backing, little backing figures, voicings, I'd sort of sing the note in the voicing, or I'd explain the way something would like zoom in the filming, or something harmonic, or I might modulate to this, or the bass line would move in the cycle of fifths or something. And I'd begin to piece it together. I got about half an hour's worth of footage on my iPhone, went inside, finished my lunch, and then I went into the music room, and I put the voice memo file into Logic, and I chopped it up into every single different idea. And I made different tracks. So I had verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, melodic solo accompaniment. I had the funky section, the intro and the ending, and I just dragged them to where they might be appropriate. And in the end, most of the ideas were appropriate for verse 3, because they were all like super crazy, right? Which is fine. And so I had these things in place. I had a few different decisions to make just regarding which ideas would be appropriate. I wanted to pace out the energy. You can't throw it all in at once, even though I kind of maybe did that. But you have to make sure that the ear you can't just throw a bunch of stuff at people. You have to kind of ease it in. So I spaced out the ideas, and then it was just a matter of kind of filling in the gaps where there were gaps. You think, oh, this needs to do this, and if you think about it kind of emotionally, you think, well, this I want to just hold it back, or I want to just release it, or I want to put some like fresh air into it, or I want to like just open it up or release it, or like clench it up and then sort of open. And if you think about it in this way, it's kind of more universal. But this is how I thought about it anyway. So, I got these ideas, put them into Logic, put them into different places. I began to kind of notate them out on paper. I'm really bad at reading music. That's the truth of it. And so, as far as notation was concerned, it's cool because you can play it back and listen to it, and you can back it up on your hard drive. So that's cool. But I think most of the conception wasn't done on paper, but it was useful to see, you can kind of examine the voice leading when it's in this environment. So I wrote the thing out. I think I have it here. No, I don't know. Yeah, I forgot to put the surveillance on my computer, so I can't open the file. Cool. But anyway, yeah, so I had this thing, and then I guess once the arrangement thing is put together in your mind, then you start recording, and that's kind of where it gets really fun,
So when you took these ideas, put them in the computer, and then decided to start recording, what's the first thing you start with?
So, I mean, there's a bunch of different sections going on here. There's the a cappella stuff, and then there's this kind of funky instrumental stuff, then there's the kind of hybrid stuff where it's kind of both, and then there's the introductions, the ending and stuff. So what I actually did is I made different Logic projects for different parts of the track, because if you put everything on one, then the computer decides to not play ball anymore, and also you lose track of what's going on, because there's like 200 tracks and you're just sort of sweating and stuff like that. So so I've got a bunch of different projects for different parts. The first thing I normally do is I'll go into the music room, close the door, get a glass of like something nice, and then start recording the a cappella. And when I do the a cappella, I start from the bass most of the time. So I'll put the whole bass track down. That's kind of the first thing, and then I work my way up. So you've got the other 5 parts, sometimes more. And then I guess the thing is, when you sing the melody in the end and it works, it's like you go, yeah, that's great, And if it doesn't work, that sucks. But,
so you're just holding the melody kind of in your mind as you're building this thing up?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you have to kind of visualize the melody, and you build up these parts, and I guess when the melody rises over the top and it works, it's a really thrilling feeling. But what you find is that the arrangement is one thing, but you can't take it too seriously, because when you start recording, everything gets real and everything changes as well. And I think the whole idea of notation is it's not the thing. The thing is the music. So the notation just kind of stands for certain things. But I kind of scroll all over the score and sort of write really weird like jokes to myself and weird stuff, and it just kind of makes me bring it to life. So when you record it, you bring it to life. So it's not really that I kind of sit down and just record the parts like this, because that's kind of sterile in some ways. I mean, when you do it, you might think, oh, that's a good idea. Something occurs to you that you could maybe try and do, or there's something comes in your mind, something doesn't work, you've got to change it around. You can't be too precious about it, but So as far as the recording is concerned, a cappella-wise, I start with the bass, work my way up, and So what I find when I'm recording this kind of stuff, I can show you the project in a second, but obviously when you start thinking about harmony, different notes in the chord, they have different personalities, right? They have different kind of purposes. So say like the root of the chord is going to be your anchor point, and that's not necessarily at the bottom, but sometimes it is, often. And so that has a certain thing, and then you've got the melody, which is the melody, and then you've got different parts of a voicing, and so when you start thinking about harmony, and that these different notes, they all have different ideas and different stuff that they do, you kind of approach recording them slightly differently, So say in a chord, I've got a note which is kind of angular, kind of weird, like the sharp 11 or something in a chord, something that's a bit off the wall. Then, as far as recording that's concerned, I might record that with a slightly different tone of voice, or I might double track it to emphasize it to the ear, or I might pan it right in the center, or maybe if I double tracked it and hard panned it, to one other side, so it sounds like it's just surrounding you. These are like emotional decisions that you make when you start recording. And so each part, has kind of a different thing. But this is like an interactive process. The moment you start recording the parts, you realize that the parts have a kind of life of their own, and you have to follow those through.
When you make these videos, you style your hair differently for every part, and you put on a different shirt. And I always sort of thought it was just a nice way visually to understand that these were different parts. But it sort of occurs to me that you see each one of these individual parts as having its own personality.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah,
and that's a visual way to represent that.
Yeah. I mean, some people love the hair different, and it's really fun to do it. When I go into the lofts, I've got a sort of loft room in my house with a white row of cupboards, like just cupboard doors, and so I sit with the cupboards, one here, and there's like a crack that goes down the middle because it's their cupboards, and I hide the crack by sitting in front of it, and so it's like a white backdrop, and then on the floor is just like a bunch of shirts and t-shirts. It's like a mess. It's really cool. You can sort of burrow away in all of your clothes, and like the cat comes in and sort of like goes crazy and stuff. But people like it. I think it's engaging for people to see, this kid with the different hair and the shirts. Even if the music is something that they can't relate to at all, at least it's fun to see it. And it's important, if you want to communicate with people, it's kind of nice to present it well. So I do take I take time to get it right. But I guess each part does have different personalities. So the bass guy is kind of got like a dark thing on, and he kind of has his hair down a lot of the time, and just sort of is kind of cool. And then the other guys have different stuff. And I mean, when you get to the filming stage, you have to kind of be aware that each part sings kind of different quirks in the arrangement. So one guy's going to go do, and the other guy's going to go but on the other side. And the bass is one of the hardest things to get right because obviously there's so many different vowel sounds that are possible. If it's like dum or do or ba or anything you like really, g. And if you get one of those wrong, you got to start again. So it's kind of like a process where you just have to be patient. But it's really fun. It's good fun.
When you're choosing those vocal sounds in the recording process, is it something that happens naturally, or do you sit with it and think, in this section where I'm going to do and then I'm going to do ga in this section?
Yeah, I guess it kind of happens naturally. I mean, so for example, in take 6, Alvin, the bass dude, he often goes dum like that, and I guess that's kind of stuck with me just because I love the dude. So that will occur. This is kind of what I was saying before. If you fill your mind with good food, then when you get to the creative situation, then it will all kind of it's in your peripheral vision, and all you have to do is just like not necessarily like if it's in the nighttime, and you look at a star, and if you look straight at the star, then it's invisible. But if you kind of look at it off, then you can see in your peripheral vision, then it's there. It's kind of maybe it's a bit like that because if you look straight at you can't look at your peripheral vision because then it's not peripheral. You have to just kind of trust that it's there. And so, if you trust your peripheral vision, then the things that you've heard in the past, things that people have said, ideas, and it's kind of just there, and all you have to do is just learn how to grab it and use it where it's appropriate. I think that's really important, to not be too kind of striving after it, but just be aware that it's kind of hanging out in the back of your mind. Yeah. What are we talking about?
So can we look at, let's look at the session of
Okay,
Fascinating
yeah.
Rhythm, and maybe you can start with the bass and show how you built that initial layer.
Good shout. All right. So welcome to...
This is Logic.
welcome to the... what's going on here? I don't know. Okay,
We'll get past that.
so here we are.
Fascinating rhythm, you got me on the go. Fascinating rhythm, I'm all agree with ba 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 da, gum doo da.
So yeah, this is the bass track. You can see it's a track stack here.
9 workers been done. Dum ba ba doo. When you stop to ba, I'm so unhappy.
So this is the first thing I do, and yeah, as you can probably see, I've double tracked this track. Makes it sound kind of beefy, gives it a bit of a kick, gives it a good strong anchor. I think without a good bass track, it's a bit lame. You just sort of, you need to have a great big good old floor to just put your feet down on. So yeah, the bass track is the first thing I do. If I just loop a section, I can build it up for you, so you can just see.
Are you hearing just click in your headphones at this point?
Yeah, so I've got a click going.
Do you have any pitch reference?
No, I don't have any pitch reference. I think it's, yeah, I have perfect pitch, which means that I know what the notes are without touching the piano, which actually, it does come in handy because some chords you don't actually tune the way that the way that you play them, the way that the piano plays them, because it's kind of wrong. I don't know how much of you guys know this, but the whole of tuning is like a scam. The piano is not in tune. Okay, this is the truth of the matter. So yeah, just quickly to explain that, in the harmonic series, which is kind of the actual harmony, like where a lot of the harmony comes from, the major third, for example, is lower than on the piano. The piano is about 16 cents sharper or 14 cents sharper, the third. So yeah. So yeah. So if I play a major chord on the piano, it's not actually quite right. So when you sing, I'm going to want to tune that third a little bit lower just because it sounds better. It's actually it's true. Back in Bach's time, the church decided that the pianos were too expensive to be made one for each key, because the piano could only play in one or two keys. So they thought, well, let's cut the budget and make sure we can get one piano that does everything, and thus the 12-tone equally tempered piano was born, which is great because I mean a lot of jazz harmony you can't get with true with justly tuned chords, but when you get into a situation like this where I'm just at home and I'm singing, I've got loads of options. And that's why if I auto-tuned it or if I used the piano all the time, then it wouldn't actually sound right. So you just bear that in mind. If you check out a bunch of stuff that's to do with just intonation, it's kind of I wonder if I can maybe show you, because this is F and A, two good friends of mine, and the A is too sharp because it's on the piano, and so this is the piano A, and if I sing the proper A, if I try and sing the proper A, that would be like. So it's slightly out of tune. I was really blown away when I discovered this. I didn't know about it. And I'd always kind of figured out that chords didn't sound quite right sometimes on the piano, but I really understood this fully, and it's crazy. It's really crazy. But we can talk about that a bit later, because there's a really fun bit in this where the tuning gets kind of crazy. But anyway, so so going back to your question, I don't have a pitch reference. I just kind of sing the stuff in, because then you can use your ears instead of using the superimposition of the piano on you, which is kind of not natural. And so then I work my way up. So if we loop a bit. Actually, the bit I was going to loop before was not that bit.
When you stop to bar, I'm so unhappy, won't you take do 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 dum 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 ba dum 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 ba dum 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 ba dum ba dum dum ba dum 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 ba dum ba dum yeah. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be.
So the only thing missing now is the melody. Let's put the melody on, see how it sounds.
Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be. Oh, how I long to be the man that I used to be.
Now this is an interesting section. I got a kick out of this because it's like microtonal a little bit. So this chord, that one. Well, let me see if I can loop that. This chord is made up of fourths, right? Fourths are like a really cool interval, really, really cool. The chord is this, right? And then I was saying before how on the piano things aren't tuned right. So actually, all these fourths are a little bit too, they're too big. Yeah, they're too big. So if you actually sing this properly, then the top note ends up like lower than this. It's like, if you tune all the fourths right. So
you're saying too big relative to what the true harmonic series naturally occurring.
Yeah, so that's right. Yeah, so like a proper fourth in the harmonic series is it's a little bit bigger than it is on the piano. So I thought about this and I did that, and so this is the first chord. The second chord I think is this. It's kind of a fun chord, and these two chords are made up of fourths. Well, the first one's fourths and the second one's fifths, right? I'm a huge fan of fifths and fourths. So cool, man. It's seriously really cool. And
you have these two chords sitting on top of each other.
Yeah, yeah. So the first chord, you got this like, it's kind of like F sharp. You could say it's F sharp half diminished, but it's not. It's just kind of F sharp fourths. And then this one, you could say that's E super ultra Lydian, which is like my own invention. But it's not really. It's kind of like C sharp major 7 over E. But it's made up of fifths, so that's kind of like going, yeah? And all of those fifths are too small on the piano, so they need to grow. They need to be bigger. And all the fourths are too small, are too big, so they need to shrink. So what you get is this thing of the first chord is like this, and then the second chord is higher. So you get
I
like,
used to be, I used to be, I used to be, I used to be, I used to be.
which is so fun. I mean, it's crazy, and I can't believe I got away with it. And a couple of people sort of
You can't believe you got away with it.
shout, yeah, because it's not. I mean, the notes aren't really notes on the piano, but this is the kind of thing. What like I would never have thought of this when I was writing it out, but when I was recording it, I thought, you know, oh, why doesn't the chord sound right? Oh, it's because this fourth, you solo each interval between. I must have looped that beep beep thing for maybe like 2.5 hours or something, just going like, you know, what's going on? So I re-recorded all the tracks, you know, one by one. You go into the chord, you think that's not right, got to do that one again. So you record it again, and I ended up with this really like low fourth chord, and then this great big fifth chord, and I just thought it was really funny.
But this is a function of the fact that so much of this arranging is happening a cappella.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, more arranging is happening in the recording process than it really is on paper. So you know, if you ever want to like start recording, just get something at home. Even if it's really kind of really just like a basic setup. You know, just like a USB microphone and Logic or even GarageBand or something. Because when you sit down with yourself, you learn so much about everything, like harmony. You learn about like patience and all that kind of stuff. But you know, I haven't, as far as learning harmony and rhythm and even production is concerned. You know, it's kind of crazy to be sitting in front of Tommy LiPuma sort of saying this, but you know, I've never really learned how to do it. So all I've really done is I've sat at home and I've worked out the things that work for me. And you know, so when I was younger, I used to think that compression just made stuff louder. So you put compressor on and you just put the gain up, and it's like that's louder, that's cool. And I've since learned that compression does more things than just that. But I mean, the basic thing that I'm saying is that this stuff is stuff you can work out on your own. And I'd really, really encourage it. Don't wait to be told. Just go out and search for the solutions to your problems, because they're out there. You just need to sort of just kind of seek them out. And you end up finding things like this, where you know you can't really write it down, but I stumbled across it, and I know how to achieve the results of things that I'm kind of looking for.
It seems like, in general, your process of arranging and your creative process is a kind of process of discovery, of kind of discovering what you know or what you feel already, and then working it into the piece.
Yeah, that's true. You always learn. You always realize that you know more than you knew you knew. Especially when you draw from things that aren't like theory-based. I wouldn't say that I draw from a bunch of like theory-based things. I'd say that I draw from a bunch of like devices that I know feel certain ways. And if you can navigate harmony via the way you feel about it instead of the things you know about it, then it's kind of really, it's better. And also I think the whole thing of like kind of being in college and learning about harmony, and there's so much harmony to be learned, and you just kind of can feel really overwhelmed, like, oh, man, you know, I've never checked out chordal voicing. Shit, I've got to go home and do that. You know, put it down. And that's kind of a disempowering thing to say to yourself. So it's better to just kind of, you know, you find things that you really enjoy listening to and that you love, and then you kind of think about why you love them and how they fit together, just for yourself in your own world, and then gradually these things will join up in your mind, and the more you learn about music, which you will learn about music. These things will kind of, they'll come together. But yeah, I definitely, every single time I do this, I learn a bunch of stuff. Because this is like my school, you know, me in the room, and just trying stuff out, and things that don't work, you know, you don't get too precious about it. You just say, well, cool, man, that didn't work. That's awesome. Let's find what does work, and then I've learned something. And then, you know, some things are too complex. You have to take stuff out. Sometimes, very occasionally, things aren't complex enough, so you've got to put more stuff in them. But you know, it's cool if you approach making music as a learning experience, but not as a kind of, you know, a really kind of judgmental student-teacher kind of vibe. Sometimes it can be kind of destructive to learning. It's better if you think of learning as coming from you, I think, than coming from somebody else. I don't know. I just think that's cool.
When you sat down at the piano and you mentioned C sharp super ultra Lydian or C super ultra Lydian, it sort of reveals a little bit of a window into the way you've invented a kind of a system for yourself about thinking about harmony. But you're also a student right now.
Yeah.
What is the relationship between what you're learning at school in college and the work that you have already started to, this process that you've developed for yourself already?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you go to school, then you learn about lots of stuff, and often it's just a lot of stuff. Schools, I think, sometimes miss out on being emotional about things. So you'll go and sit in the classroom, and you're fed a stream of information, and it's kind of not, it's kind of foreign to you. And it's kind of going back to what I was saying before, but if you can relate things you're learning to things that you know, and you do know the stuff, even if you don't know what it's called, or even if you don't know how it sounds yet, you understand the emotional impact of things, because that's why you enjoy listening to music. You know, you think, oh man, that's just such a kind of touching little chord sequence, or I love the way it goes, modulates to thing, or I love it A sus in September, you know, I love that sound, and something like, you know, I think we've all had these thoughts before.
I love an ASUS in September.
Like, you know, the dum, 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 but it's like the chord, you know, so thrilling. It's like one of the best moments in all of music. But, you know, so at school, you're fed lots of things, but I think it's important to go and work things out for yourself. I sometimes sit in classes and I disagree with the teachers. I wouldn't necessarily kind of stand up and stomp my foot and then, like, that kind of sucks. But it's cool to go home and just consolidate things on your own and work out, you know, you need to have your own anchor in the floor before someone else's anchor is like spewed all over you. And school is just an awesome environment for just collecting as much as you can. It's kind of whatever you want to take from it, you can take from it. It's not the gospel truth, but, you know, so at college I learn jazz standards. I'm exposed to really cool musicians who come in and do classes. As far as kind of, you know, being in the harmony class and stuff is concerned, you have to kind of take it with a pinch of salt, just because harmony is like, it's up to you what you want to do. But yeah, I definitely just be up for learning stuff, because this is the time in one's life where one learns about loads of stuff, including music, if one seeks to do that. So yeah, it's not good to be closed-minded, but it is good to be open-minded, and it's good to just kind of have your own space. That was big for me anyway, just having my own space and the freedom to play with it and kind of challenge what I was being told, you know.
So getting back to Fascinating Rhythm,
Yeah.
One of the other things I think about, it's amazing that because you're so young and you've been doing this already for a few years, the world is watching you kind of unfold, right? Like we see your influences, we see when you start to develop new techniques. Your initial videos were much more a cappella. As you develop, they're becoming more instrumental. And I wonder if like what you're listening to at the time, or whatever you're kind of thinking about musically, works its way into the projects.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's massive. That's absolutely right. I mean, it's really fun to kind of revisit these files, because I haven't opened up these files since I did the stuff, and I find little kind of jokes of things that I've put in, and I think, oh, why did I do that? Oh, it's because I was into this girl at the time, and I sort of like did this, or I listened to this record was like huge for me. And so I just kind of I'd slip bits in, and sometimes I'd generate ideas, and then I'd realize the ideas were from something I've heard before. I bet you guys have had that experience. You think, oh man, I'm a genius, this is so good, and then it's like, oh no. You know, like Stevie Wonder did it, you know, in the 70s. But it's good. That's kind of a sign that you really are being involved in the music that you're listening to. So that's cool. But yeah, absolutely, the stuff that is in my life at any kind of time, you can't be separate as a musician from the way you are as a person, I don't think. If you're going to be honest to yourself, you've got to embrace every single part of you and just kind of communicate that as best you can. And so, you know, if something's happening in my life or whatever it is, then that will probably come through. And if it doesn't, then it's kind of a sign that I'm being dissonant with my own energy. You need to be true to your own energy. And so things that, you know, I'll stumble across, like a friend of mine will hit me to something, and I think, hey, that's great, and I'll put it in. It will find its way in here, because there's kind of a osmosis thing happening.
So what were you thinking about when you did this arrangement?
So I got obsessed with D'Angelo. I don't know how many of you guys are obsessed with D'Angelo. I really am obsessed with him. And I was into D'Angelo, and I was into this guy, Jay Diller, who's a producer from the early 2000s. He's kind of a revolutionary. Both of those guys, they developed this thing where a beat is not quantized. And by quantized, I mean, you know, it's put in a rhythmic grid, you know, so it's like, and everything's in this grid. I've never been a huge fan of this, just like I've never been a huge fan of autotune, but D'Angelo and Jay Diller did this thing where the beat was kind of out. And you can theorize it, and I kind of have a little bit, but the basic idea is that it's kind of like a drunken groove, and the groove doesn't gel as a sort of quantized groove. It's much more like a loose thing. So they developed this lilt thing. So instead of it being like, it's like this, which is cool. I really fell in love with it, and so I was just like really into that, and then I thought, oh, I'll do a funky section in the middle, that'd be fun, and I ended up putting it in, you know, this lilt groove thing that I was so fascinated by, and so that was one thing that really fed. I mean, I can maybe show you that now. That really fed into the process, big time. So Quintal Groove, yeah.
And why is it called the Quintal Groove?
A quintal groove is something I kind of coined the phrase. It's not really real, but quintal means it's in 5 divisions. So you know how in a groove, most grooves are in 4 divisions. You know, like 4. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4 in every beat. So that is. So this is cool. And then you get grooves in 3, like 3. 5 is awesome, man. Check out 5. Five is so cool. There's like this ancient Tanzanian music that comes from sort of ancient Tanzania, where they did this way before I guess anybody else. The rhythm in this village used to be like, and then it softened over the years, and it kind of melded into like, and it's so cool, man. It's like the best. It's kind of just so laid back, and everyone else is going like, and it's like, I was freaking out, man. But anyway, 5 divisions is killing in like hip hop as well. So if I get a groove instead of going like this, if I go, this is 5 divisions, like this, right? 5 divisions. And I got really obsessed with this. I checked it out in a big way. And actually 7 is cool as well, but let's not get into that. But so for this one, it's called Quintal Groove just because the tambourine is in 5 divisions. It's going like like this. And so that's kind of a way of understanding the D'Angelo approach to groove in a way which is kind of like you can understand in terms of a framework.
Do you think that they did this math also?
I don't think they did. I mean, I've obsessively watched interviews with Questlove and Dilla about this, and they just said, oh no man, it's just a drunken groove, you know, we were just kind of like, we didn't know what we were doing, but it wasn't quantized. So Jay Dilla was one of the first ever producers to turn the quantize off on his drum machine. So he'd get samples that didn't quite fit the length of time he was filling, and so the sample would sort of go, and this, and then thus the kind of jilted groove was born. But no, they weren't doing 5 divisions. That's kind of just me liking frameworks of understanding and figuring out that if you take that into, you know, playing in a funk scenario, like if you get a bar of 5/8, for example, you know, it's just really cool. It's a nice way of thinking about it, but you know, don't take it seriously. Don't go home and try and listen to Jay Dilla and just be kind of like this, because it's not the deal. Jay Dilla was just having fun.
All right, so what does it sound like?
Okay, so check this out.
Can you solo some of the elements to see how you built that groove?
Absolutely. So okay, so check out the tambourines. Right? That's the 5. But it's basically just that, you know. And then, you know, you've got.
But it's not a normal swinging tambourine.
Yeah,
It's actually
no,
divided
it's
into
like
5.
yeah, it's kind of wonky. I enjoy that.
So this is all programmed.
So yeah, so this is the real kick. That's my kick drum, and then the claps are real, and these proper claps like this. I went into every single room in my house. There are 10 rooms, and I took my laptop on my microphone, and I recorded a clap in every room of the house. And then I went into the music room and put them all together, and this is the clap I got. just because it's fun, you know. See there,
Is that on the final thing?
Yeah. So this is called Quinta. I name my tracks stupid stuff anyway, but because what I'm doing is I'm going in 5 divisions. I'm going, and occasionally it will happen. So it kind of brings it to life a bit. And then you've got like. Anyway, so that's this kind of thing, and then you've got the whole other side of the story, which is like the voices, and you've got this is the voices. You see all the tracks there. And then you've got a little bit of bass. So that bass is a mixture of synth bass and real bass. I merged them together.
So this loop is a loop of a few bars.
Yeah, so I'm just looping a few bars. And then obviously you've got the synths going on. I design my own sort of synth patches just because I don't like the presets. So why not make your own ones? And then, you know. So you know, it's like it's the same stuff as the voices, but I found the sound, the combination of synth and vocals, I just really enjoyed it. So I just.
Do you run into trouble in terms of tuning?
Sometimes, I mean, for this harmony, some chords just sadly are impossible to tune correctly. For example, just to really quickly do a little example of this, a 6/9 chord, such as this, you can't tune it correctly because this D is the 9th, and that should be tuned, so 2 fifths up is kind of a bit bigger, but then this note is the 3rd of F, and that should be lower. So these 2 notes can't be in tune. So for this kind of dense harmony, unless it's like quintal or quartal harmony with 4ths or 5ths, or pure triadic harmony, it's kind of hard to tune it right. So this kind of harmony is pretty much equally tempered, just because it's the same as the synths, because it's not possible, sadly, to do it. So these are in unison with each other, really.
Just to take that little fragment of vocal and synth, when you built this groove and then you start to put together this sort of shout chorusy elements of the voice and the synth, what do you start with? Are you improvising? Is it written?
That was kind of improvised. There's a way of building grooves that I've kind of discovered where I'm sure you guys have checked this out without knowing it, but the best grooves aren't just like in unison with each other. So like say the bass is going and then the drums are going and then the vocals are going it kind of sucks just because it's like it's kind of like it's not a very mature way of making grooves just because everything's the same as each other. That's like learning it's like kind of black and white, or learning that tension and release is either tension or release without there being anything in between. The best grooves are kind of dissonant with itself, so that's why the bass is like on the back of the beat and the hi-hat's pushing it forward with the little thing, and it's not quantized. I wouldn't advertise quantization really in general. I think it just puts you in a bit of a box that's hard to break out of, and so
So you start to improvise over the track?
Yeah. So I got the bass, and I thought, well, where are the gaps in the bass so I can fill the gaps instead of just doing the same thing as the bass? Where are the gaps? So that's how the whole he's just kind of creating some momentum in the groove, and you don't really even notice it. It's just kind of you just feel that it's moving, instead of it just sort of being stagnant. So little elements like that bring the groove to life. I didn't use that one in the end. that's a groove. So I might spend a couple of days just making that groove, grooving around my room, just kind of standing up and moving around, seeing how it feels.
How long does it take you to put the whole thing together?
The whole video?
Yeah, the whole piece.
This one was, I was telling you just now, this was 10 days. So on my birthday, August the 2nd, I went into my music room and I sort of said, this is it. I just got back from my holiday, and when I was on the holiday, I got a bunch of ideas, and I just thought, I'm going to do it. So I'm kind of difficult to disturb in that time. I sort of turn my phone and internet completely off, which I really like doing, actually, and close the door and just record. So you arrange it first of all, then you record it, and then if you get bored of recording it, then you can work on the groove, and then vice versa, and in the end, you'll have two things which are kind of finished. And then you get to a stage where all the different sections are done, and there are certain gaps, you know. So, like, for example, one such gap is, this might take a bit of a while to load up, but, you know, there was a gap between the first verse and the second verse. And so I had to think of something to fill it. But I often kind of improvise things whilst recording. I don't think it's that important to write stuff down. So, you know, there was a gap, and I thought, well, what's going to be fun to fill the gap? And so I came up with this. Oh, it's going to take ages. There's so many audio files, but I came up with a little thing that fit in that gap. So you know, what you find in the end is that you have a whole bunch of different things that can fit together if you just think about how they can fit together. And then, you know, it's a matter of just sort of thinking, well, what would be appropriate to fill the gap, and then making it into a whole shape. And with this one, it was cool because I at the very, very end of the process, I came up with the idea of the 14 faces, just because that kind of united the thing, you know. So the introduction is the 14, they kind of come in and out, and then the ending is the 14 as well. So it has a kind of overarching shape, which is really kind of neat, and that was cool. And so, you know, so the intro for this is actually one of the last things I did in the process. It was, I thought, I just started with the do better than that, and I thought, that's cool, I've got that down, and I've recorded it, and how am I going to open this thing up? And I had the idea for this great big chord. I love great big chords, you know. And so I wanted to build it up note by note, and I had the idea of getting this sort of typewriter thing, which actually I can open up the intro. That might be fun. So yeah, I took a really old little computer keyboard into my sister's bedroom, and there's a cupboard in there which is ultra dry, so dry. There's absolutely no reverb. It's like anti-reverb. You sort of go in, and yeah, it's like sucked out of your ears. But I went in, I took in my laptop. The laptop was outside because it's a really small cupboard, and I had the keyboard there, and I wrote down the numbers of letters in each word of Fascinating Rhythm, written by George Gershwin, arranged, whatever. And I figured out a way to put it into whatever it is, the number of like 32 bars or 16 bars or something. And I recorded the typewriter in that setting, because when I did it in the music room, it sort of went like, because my room's not that small, and in the cupboard it was like, so that was cool. So I did that.
And you play it as a rhythmic phrase on typewriter?
Yeah, so I played it as a rhythmic phrase. So this is the, that's my sister's little like chicken timer. And then I had this thing going on, which is the chicken timer just being timing. Then you got the typewriter here.
And each one of those phrases is a word.
Yeah. So as you can see on the video, you can see it's typing there.
So it seems clear in breaking that down that you're thinking visually as you're arranging it.
Yeah, I guess that's right, Leo. Yeah, I am. I think it's that particular idea was a visual idea, just because. I had the idea for the words, and I thought it'd be kind of neat. And I'd seen someone do a typewriter thing, and I was really inspired by it. So that's another thing. Someone sent me a link, and I thought, oh, I've got to try and do it. And then one of the things I love to do best is this kind of like zooming thing that I did at the end. If I just loop that, I can show you how it's built up. Because you know, my recording techniques are not kind of liturgical; they're not very organised. So I obviously had all of this stuff. That's cool. And then the rest of that zoomy sound is a bunch of other stuff. There's, let's see, what have we got? Right. So that is 2 thumb pianos, sort of going like, dum, 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 and then I reverse it and it goes, which is one of my favorite sounds. And then there's this, which is cymbal, reverse cymbal. There's another cymbal there. And you got that, and then you got on the bass, just like doing this. And then obviously you've got. And so I would loop that, and I'd sort of be there and going really crazy, and just thinking, what's going to be good. But this is why I love my room, just because I can look around the room and see a bunch of stuff, and I think, oh, that will do, and just sort of take that and do something on it and reverse it, and that's exciting because you've got to be engaged in your space and the process of the space. So that was an example of something. This was one of the last things I did in the process. I thought, how's it going to work? How did I do for the 14 faces? I was really stoked about it, and so I made it work. Yeah.
I think we have like around 15 minutes left in our presentation, and it occurs to me that maybe we should wrap up our conversation and then open it up to some questions if there's anybody in the room that would like to ask a question. Is that okay with you?
That's totally cool. Yeah.
Should we finish up anything? You guys don't have to ask questions, by the way. There's no obligation. Is there anything we should look at in this process that we haven't talked about, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, we've covered most of the process, I think,
I just have a point of question, like something I noticed in the video. You play a melodica solo, and at the end of the solo, the voices all kind of orchestrate the solo.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So actually, I can maybe just play that right now. So I wrote the melodic accompaniment, which is kind of hard to do because I hadn't done the solo yet, so I didn't know where I was going to play. Yeah, and so that was something I wrote first of all, and then obviously when the melodica solo was played, I had to think about what gaps there were to be filled, and it's kind of like doing it the wrong way around in some ways, because I should have done the solo first, but I had to write the thing, otherwise that would have sucked, and I would have had no thing. So, so when you think about making grooves, kind of like I was saying before, I find that the greatest accompanists, but just by instinct, they find the gaps in the phrasings, and they just aid it. Instead of, so say for example you're playing a solo, as you might be playing a solo, I don't know, and your accompanist is playing the exact same stuff as you, like this often happens when you're playing music with someone, and they sort of go, like say you're playing on a swing tune, and the solo sort of went like ba ba doo ba 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 doo ba 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 doo ba, and then the accompanist gets really stoked and goes like ba 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 ba, and then looks up at you like a sort of really excited guy. And I find that this is cool, but you're playing in unison with the soloist, so you're not actually adding anything. It's better if you find the gaps in the phrasing and do that. So when I was thinking about doing the melodica solo, you have to think about when the comping phrase ends and the melodica phrase begins, so that one can feed into the other. I guess that's a nice thing to bear in mind when you're thinking about building grooves, and also just accompanying and soloing as well. Just how the phrases kind of interlink and complement each other.
So you built this accompaniment for a solo that hadn't happened yet,
Yeah.
but you're thinking, what would be the kind of propulsive rhythmic thing that I want a solo on top of?
Yeah, and I had to be careful because my instinct would just say like fill the whole thing up with stuff, and then I had to sort of remember that that's not good. You have to leave space for things to happen. So I left some space in different places for the melodica to do some stuff. And you know, I think that's interesting when you get when you do it that way around. I mean, I certainly learned a lot. I had to change the accompaniment a bit because, you know, the accompaniment did some crazy thing, and I had to just take it out in the end because I wanted to allow the melodica solo to just kind of speak for itself. You can see gaps here, like around here, where things. Yeah, there was something here that happened. I had to take it out just because it was too
So you're
much.
leaving space for the solo.
Yeah, that's right.
And then in the end, since you knew what the accompaniment was, you played the last lick of your solo
Yeah.
was the
That's
to
right. Yeah.
connect with the
Yeah,
accompaniment.
yeah, you got it. Yeah. Cool. If anyone's got any questions, I'd gladly answer them. Yes.
Hi. Okay, so when you're building counterpoints, are you sort of looking at, 'cause I know this solo was really, you were looking for the active plateau or gaps. Are you looking at it from a more logistical or an emotional standpoint, or do you try to combine both?
So are you talking about when I'm making like a solo accompaniment or the whole thing? The whole thing. Good question. That's great. So yeah, definitely emotional. I don't sort of sit down with my my textbook and dig out some stuff. But I mean, in my mind, I've kind of lodged certain things that work. So you know, for example, certain voicings or certain backing figures and things like this. But I think about that really emotionally because you know you want to be able to support something that's going on. The other week I was just I was trying to think about how to explain how certain things harmonically can echo things in real life. I made a list of things in life that might be able to be expressed harmonically. Like I came up with one which I kind of like. So, say you lean your elbow on a girl's shoulder for the first time, and then you just feel her soften a little bit underneath you. Like that's great. That's such a good feeling, you know. So that you might want to try and capture that feeling of just kind of like whoa, or something, or like that's just like soft, or that's liberating, or like my eyes are widened or something. And these things, when you start thinking about harmony in these ways, then you can, instead of thinking, I'm going to create a track now and it's just going to be a whole bunch of stuff that I've learned and I understand, you don't think about that. You more think, this section needs to leave some space, or this section needs to have some daylight in it. And actually, you know, then I'll end up changing the timbre of my voice, you know. So if I'm singing, like, you know, there's a bit where it goes, and I know that, right here.
How I long to be the man. I know you do it wrong.
So this is something I didn't notate this bit.
I
Know that was kind of, I came up with that when I was recording.
But now you do it wrong when you stop to butter. I'm so unhappy. Now you do it wrong. Won't you take the day off? Stop to butter when you stop to butter. You know I'm so unhappy. I know that once it didn't matter. But now you do it wrong, so wrong when you stop to butter. You know I'm so, and I know that once it didn't matter. But now you do it wrong, so wrong.
So as far as the tone, like the emotional tone of this is concerned, I made the vocal sound. It wasn't like ah. It was more like ah. You know, it's a subtle difference. But if you shout something, then it has a certain kind of effect. It's kind of like a gospelly choir, like whoa. And if you just smooth it out and do it kind of softly, then that has a different effect. So you know, as far as that was concerned, I had to find something that would support the melody line. But it had to be kind of out of the way. But as far as an emotional thing was concerned, I wanted it to be kind of strong. And you want to be. I know that once I use the lyrics because I know that once it didn't matter, but now you do it wrong. When you stop to patter, I'm so unhappy. And so this guy's going, you know, well I know that once it's kind of saying the same thing, but you know, it really means it. He knows it, and he's going to stand by his word. So he's going to be strong, and the voicing is just kind of like, I mean, the voicing is made up of basically fifths, which is great. And so, you know, it's a strong thing, but I was thinking about the tone of voice, which is kind of strong, and I was thinking about the voicing, which is strong, and that came from like an emotional decision to
And you say so wrong. It's the only thing that you're introducing any real vibrato into.
Yeah, so long.
It's like really emotional. He's so long.
Yeah, this is something I think that everyone who plays an instrument, especially singers, can really utilize. Is, you know, the amount of timbre you can get out of your instrument is immense. You know, the more you think about it. So, you know, I don't tend to use that much vibrato when I'm recording, just because you know, the harmony doesn't. I mean, unless it's like an effect. I think often singers just use vibrato on automatic pilot, and they forget that it's like a decision to use vibrato. And you know, that's something that I might choose to use at one point. I might go like whoa in like loads of voices, and it'll be like, you know. But most of the time, I keep kind of pure. But it means that when you hold back from something like that and then you use it, then it has an impact instead of using it all the time and it loses its meaning. But you know, the more things you have as far as timbre is concerned, the more things you can do emotionally with that. Same with harmony. The more harmonic devices that you have in your heart, the more you can kind of draw from those, you know, which is cool.
By the way, that question was, are you thinking emotionally or logistically when you're doing these accompaniments?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as far as logistics are concerned, you have to think about it a bit, but I think the logistics feed the emotion as opposed to the other way around, of the emotions just kind of leaching off the, I don't know. Yeah, you know, you definitely think about how the thing's going to work as a whole, and that involves knowing about harmony a bit. But I think more important than that, and the thing that communicates much further than technical brilliance is like emotional depth and just knowing where it comes from and knowing what you want to communicate with that, I think. Hey. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
So the question is, have you played with a band? If so, then you probably know that it's much harder to coax this out of working with a group of people than working alone. And
Yeah.
was it hard to learn how to do this with the computer?
Yeah, great questions. So, yes, I have played with the band. It's really good fun. It's great. You have to, when you play in a band, you have to learn to be selfless in a band situation and be a supporter, especially as a piano player. You've got to learn how to support, which comes from this process actually, because you learn how to support yourself in this environment. This is kind of like a learning environment for me. You know, obviously I've got my space. In this space, I know what's happening. I know how to achieve certain results. I have no time constraints. It's kind of like an unrealistic musician's situation. When you play with other musicians, you have to make things clearer for them to understand. You have to often take a lot of stuff out. And the whole process is different because you're interacting with each other instead of building something from scratch, completely on your own. But I mean, one certainly feeds the other. You know, I'll go and play with other people, and I'll find a groove that, you know, that I couldn't have thought about on my own. Because obviously, when you're on your own, you get into a circular thought motions, and then you find that your mind finds the same motions over and over again, and that it's better, it's important and crucial to play with other musicians to feed you sometimes. The same as listening to music. You know, you have to try and listen to some new music often. As far as learning the software is concerned, it's the same way I've learned harmony. I've just sort of, I got Logic when I was 11, I think, Logic 6, and I really gravitated towards it. I just started experimenting. I always recorded a cappella stuff, even when I was a young lad, and so the more of it I did, the more of it you do, the more you just inevitably learn about it, because you realize something doesn't work and you think about why, and then you try and fix it, and you don't know how to do it, so you ask someone for help or whatever. But you know, it's my world, and every single time that I do something like this on it, I just learn a bunch of stuff about it. You know, it's cool to get started maybe with someone who knows a bit of the kind of the ropes of the software. You know, but you know, basically I've learned the software and music just by experimenting, thinking emotionally about different things that I want to achieve, and then just trying to achieve them. You know, so like a sound, say I wanted to get like a sound, then I look around the room and think, oh, that will do, put them together, reverse them, put a crazy effect on them, and you know, you find little sounds that work. And it's also useful to listen to music and try and recreate sounds that you hear on records. Something I do sometimes, especially with D'Angelo. I thought so carefully about the sounds, the way the drum kit sounded, and I tried to get the exact same sound on something I did. And that doesn't necessarily lead you to the same result, but it definitely leads you to think about things. And normally what happens is you'll start recreating something, then you'll have your own ideas, and it becomes your thing, but you've learned from the thing to which you were listening, which is nice. So yeah, does that answer your question? Yeah. Cool.
We got time for one more.
Yeah, I don't have any classical training.
I thought you said you took classical training.
No, I mean I learned classical singing when I was much younger. But yeah, no, as far as technique is concerned, I haven't learned anything really from classical. And I can play something for you if you'd like. But
that would be great.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
All right. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the land that I heard of once, it really will come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up with clouds so far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops, or high above the chimney tops, there's where you'll find me somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. There's a place that I heard of once in a lullaby, once in a lullaby. So the skies are blue. In a land that I once heard of, these dreams really do come true. Somewhere over the rainbow, where skies are blue, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. In a lullaby, in a lullaby, my dreams really do come true.
Jacob Collier.
Thanks. All right. Tommy.